Monday morning, and England might have lost their Euros final against Spain last night, but the new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the team still made the country proud, and he says he now wants the government to do more to make football and other sports more accessible. Let's speak to the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, who joins us from Westminster, but I spotted you in the stadium in Berlin last night. How was that?
Well, you'll excuse me if I'm not very articulate this morning. We arrived back at about 3 a.m, but it was an amazing night. I mean, it wasn't the result that we wanted. I think no one was more disappointed than the Prime Minister, who is very famously a big football fan. But the atmosphere in the stadium was just electric. The England fans did us absolutely proud. You could hear them from the rooftops. And I think, you know, the players put up a really good fight. They gave us an amazing game of football. It wasn't the result that we wanted, but I feel very much that they've done their job and we now need to do ours by making sure that football is accessible to a whole generation of kids who will have been turning on their TV sets last night and thinking maybe one day that could be me. My job is to make sure that it is.
We've heard on BBC Breakfast this morning from England's 1966 hero, Sir Geoff Hurst, and he said exactly that. He said, look, let's not forget 2 Euros finals in a row, great success to build on for the future. He's calling for more investment in grassroots football, exactly what you're talking about. So when are we going to see it and how much?
Yeah, so don't forget the Lionesses as well, because what they've done is inspire a whole generation of girls to believe that they can do it as well, and that's one of the most exciting fast-growing parts of sport now. But the number of facilities that are available in local communities are just being outstripped by the interest and the demand from young people. And I feel it very much in Wigan, where I'm the MP. We're really struggling to be able to keep up. So what we're announcing today is that the funding that was due to end in April next year for grassroots facilities to be made available to communities across the country will continue. We'll obviously enter into negotiations with the Treasury about exactly how much we can make available, but we are committed to ensuring that that continues as part of the legacy of these Euros, and more than that, that we're going to take measures to make sure that PE is protected on the curriculum, that we do more to protect our football clubs. You know, I was watching Kieran Trippier last night, who is the pride of Bury, but Bury FC, which was my first visit as Culture Secretary this week, was very famously a club that was allowed to collapse because of dodgy ownership and poor regulation. It's our intention to put all of these issues up front and centre at the heart of the next government to ensure that in every part of Britain where talent is everywhere, that opportunity is also spread fairly across the country.
OK, so just to be clear on the money, the last government, the Conservative government, I think put up about 90 million, didn't they, for grassroots sports. Are you saying you're going to match that going forward? Well,
we'll certainly ensure that the funding continues.
That amount of funding?
Well, the funding that that has been committed to already, we will continue. But there's something else that we're announcing today as well, which is that there has been a pilot scheme to look at whether local clubs could take over their grassroots pitches, because at present many of those pitches are maintained by councils who've had extremely bad funding settlements, are really cash strapped and have been struggling to do it. We know that there's an army of volunteers out there who would be willing to do that. Clubs are absolutely itching to be able to get their hands on those facilities and to be able to maintain them to the highest standards as a visible symbol for children in their communities that they matter. That pilot, we're going to work with the FA and others, not just to support but to extend to other parts of the country, so that there are far greater powers of ownership for local clubs in every part of the community.
You hinted a moment ago about the professional clubs as well. You were talking about Bury, and there's been talk for some time about a football regulator, hasn't there? Which is something that the smaller clubs are very keen to see, but some of the bigger clubs, massive businesses, big brands, aren't so keen. How are you going to balance that difference?
Well, it was in our manifesto. It's a top priority. It's personal for me because my own club, Wigan Athletic, came close to collapse not once but twice, and we had to fight very hard to save it. And it's clear that we've got to be proportionate about the way that we approach this. I saw the Premier League and the EFL and others last night at the match. Yesterday was a perfect example of this. The Premier League is one of our greatest exports. They give us these incredible sporting moments and this top-flight football. But look at many of the players who were on that pitch last night. They come from places like Bury, from Stockport, from Washington, from parts of the country where football is threatened, and the football clubs that stand at the heart of their communities have been threatened over and over again by a system that doesn't protect against bad ownership, that doesn't ensure proper financial sustainability, and that doesn't incentivise clubs like Premier League clubs and the lower tier clubs to come to an agreement about how finances are shared within the game. It's not my intention that we should come in and be heavy-handed about this. It's the role of sport, of football itself, to reach an agreement about that. What we want to do is to make sure that we get the framework right so that they're incentivised to reach an agreement that has eluded us for too long.
It sounds like this is all pretty definite. So can we expect to see this in the King's speech when you lay out your legal plans on Wednesday?
Well, I wouldn't want to preempt what the King is going to announce, but I think having made my first visit to Bury FC to meet the supporters at Gig Lane and made this a personal priority, I think you can probably tell that we intend to crack on as soon as possible and fulfil that promise to football fans across the country.
Lisa, Nandy, while you're with us, can we just talk about events in the United States over the weekend, that attempted assassination of Donald Trump? Of course, you were close to Joe Cox, who was murdered, a fellow Labour MP. We also saw the murder of David Amis. As a prominent politician here, what do you think when you see something like that happening anywhere in the world?
Horrified and angry that our politics has been allowed to descend to that level. The Prime Minister spoke to President Trump last night as we arrived in Berlin to convey not only his sympathies but also his horror at what had happened, and to condemn that violence and to convey his sympathies to the victims of that attack as well. It's been heartening to see many world leaders come out and stand against what happened in America yesterday, but it is part of a wider toxicity of politics. We've just been through the general election here in the UK. It is the most toxic election that I can ever remember participating in. And I think what we need is real leadership across the political spectrum. But you can rest assured that you'll find that from this government, that we will condemn violence wherever it is found. Keir Starmer has been clear that his government will uphold the highest standards, not just in what we do in politics, but in how we conduct ourselves as well. And the new cabinet very much intends that we're going to have a reset moment in politics where we have far less heat, far more light, where we can disagree agreeably and we can set a better tone for the political debate that we have out in the country. I
mean, part of your job now is looking at the media, isn't it? And online and digital and messaging, that kind of thing, the harm that can be done out there, that toxicity you're talking about. What kinds of things do you think you might be prepared to introduce or change to try to improve political culture and debate here in the UK, to get rid of that toxicity?
Well, there's a balance to be struck, because obviously we want to make sure that people are protected and that their rights to free speech are protected, particularly in the social media space, where too often people feel hounded or shouted out of the debate. But there's a real balance to be struck, I think, between that and the right of particularly the media to speak freely and fairly, and I feel very strongly about that. It's not the job of politicians or government to dictate what can or cannot be said. I want to bring an end to this constant political interference in the media. The accusations against many of our institutions and individual journalists have got to stop. A free and fair media is an absolutely essential precondition of a political system, and for me this really is about trust. People have to be able to trust that the systems that we have enable them to have a voice, and that they can trust what they're being told and what is being reported. So there's a lot of work for the new government to do, me in particular with the Prime Minister, to get the right regulatory framework so that all those things are possible. But you can rest assured that there will be a very new approach from this government, whilst we're very concerned to make sure that there are safeguards for people, particularly in the online space. I am instinctively very, very cautious about the idea that politicians should ever be trying to politicise the media. I think we've seen far too much of that in recent years, and I think the relationship between the media and politicians is often very uncomfortable, and so it should be, because they hold us to account, and I intend to take a very different approach from the previous government to that.
As Culture Secretary, you're also going to have to look at the BBC licence fee in the Charter going forward, aren't you? I know Sir Keir Starmer said he was committed to it for now, I think he said, but there is going to have to be some thought between now and 2027, but we are committed. How committed is he to the BBC licence fee?
Well, both he and I have been supporters of the BBC licence fee, but we do want to make sure that the BBC, as a public service broadcaster who matters hugely to our public life, is responsive to the public in every part of Britain and is enabled to tell an inclusive story about what it means to live in this country. We want to make sure, for example, that the commissioning power, not just in the BBC but across the whole of the media, isn't just concentrated in London, and that we can see, people can see their own lives, their communities, their history, their futures reflected in the story that we tell. I know that's something that the current management at the BBC is very committed to, because I was at Media City in Salford just after I'd been to Bury FC as part of my first visit, seeing the great content that they produce there. That move to Media City has been really important for the north of England, because it hasn't just been a game changer for the northwest economy, but it's also opened up the range of voices that are heard on the news, as you know, Charlie, and it's helped to make sure that what is reported remains relevant to people in broader communities and broader geographical areas. I think the BBC is very committed to that. It's a very exciting agenda, and it's all part of what we want to look at to make sure that the BBC can continue to go on and thrive well into the future.
Hopefully we'll see you here in Media City before too long. In the meantime, have a good sleep. Thank you very much indeed.